Thank you to today's show sponsor, Azalea Orthopedics. They are a group of highly trained physicians and surgeons in East Texas that will meet all of your orthopedic needs. To learn more about Azalea Orthopedics, go to azaleaortho.com. That is azaleaortho.com. Welcome to Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace. I am Dr. Grace English, founder of Deep in the Heart Ministries. We are a ministry that exists to tackle the hard realities of this life through the power of Jesus Christ. He is the only one that can set us free from our addictions, our negative thoughts and emotions, and bring us the true lasting healing and peace that He wants for our lives. Welcome to Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is a beautiful gift, raising a special needs child. Raising children is one of the most important jobs that you are ever going to do. It is also the most challenging job that that God's going to give you as well, especially if you have special needs children. And today I am going to be interviewing Doctors Ann and Warren Abremeit, who have raised Lauren, their special needs child, who is 26 years old now, and they are going to share the wisdom that the Lord has taught them through these last 26 years. And I really think y'all are going to enjoy hearing from them. Ann and Warren, I think they're originally from Texas, but anyhow, they both went to Texas A&M for undergrad, and they met each other at Texas A&M Medical School. And so they're both physicians. Warren is a general surgeon, and Ann is an OB-GYN. And they both married after residency, their first year, and they got married in 1992. And so they live in Tyler, and they have 3 kids, Megan, who is 28, Lauren, who is 26, and Matthew, who is 22. And they both are members of Bethel Hope Church, and what they love to do is to mentor married couples. They love to travel, and they love food. And so anyways, welcome to the show. Really appreciate y'all being here. So tell us first, Warren, just tell the listeners kind of like your childhood and what was it like growing up?
So I was raised in South Texas and kind of a country boy and came from that type of background. Church-wise, we were Lutheran, German Lutheran. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until college where I kind of heard Bible teaching in a different way that I had, and I grew a lot then. My family, I had 3 older sisters. I'm like the baby big time. Like my youngest sister is 7 years older than me. So I was an accident. Anyway, so still a lot of those roots there in South Texas, and that's where my family lives.
That is great. That is great. So it sounds like you had a very stable home life, and you got to know the Lord fairly early on.
Yeah, sure. Definitely, for sure.
And Ann, how about you?
Yeah, I was the oldest of 3 girls and grew up in a stable family as well. My dad was the president of a candy company, and I went to Texas A&M for undergrad. I was a typical type A oldest child. Went to A&M for med school, settled on obstetrics and gynecology. Mm-hmm. My folks were Methodists, but my dad lost his job, and when that happened, they started going to a non-denominational church, and so accepted Jesus through Young Life in high school.
Yay! Young Life is great. Oh my gosh, what a ministry they have, and so y'all got married the year after your intern year, and then y'all had decided to come to Tyler to start your careers, right?
Correct.
And so Warren, I know that you and we've been with Trinity Clinic all these years, and then Ann, you were in private practice.
I was. I worked for Tyler Obstetrics and Gynecology. Yeah.
Good. And so y'all had Megan, your first child, and how was your pregnancy? How was it? What was she like?
Yeah, so we moved to Tyler. We were both practicing. We had our first daughter, Megan. She was very bright and imaginative. And when she was 2, Lauren was born, and she was just the perfect baby. And by perfect, I mean she just laid there. She smiled. Took a while for her to sit up, but she had great eye contact. She seemed to understand us when we talked to her, but she never really cooed or babbled. And so I just chalked it up that all kids are different and develop at different rates. But when she was 14 months, she still wasn't even crawling, and we took her to our pediatrician, and that started the whole route of diagnoses.
Right. Because Megan she was a normal child.
Yeah, maybe even super normal, right? So
Right.
she was the one who we, put all of our energy in reading. Ann was doing all kinds of sight memorization words with her, and
Megan is very bright.
Yeah. So when Lauren came, that was a whole different ball game, and we thought, well, Megan's maybe extreme one way, and Lauren is, just different, and
So your pediatrician here never really picked up that there was anything developmentally.
About 14 months, he said, she needs to go to see a developmental pediatrician in Dallas because she wasn't walking, she wasn't. And so he sent us to Dallas to a developmental pediatrician. And she diagnosed Lauren with low tone, probable significant MR or mental retardation. Now we like to say developmental delays, but MR is fine with us.
So how were y'all before you even went up there for that second opinion? Like, what were your emotions like? Did y'all expect something?
I think probably Ann did a little more. I don't know. It's funny to look back, right? 26 years. I don't remember what I did yesterday sometimes. So, but I would say there was some apprehension, and we knew our pediatrician very well. But I think everyone's trying to always be kind of nonchalant till you really know. And because she doesn't have something like maybe a Down syndrome or something where there's more facial findings or other, it's a lot harder kind of diagnosis to make because a lot of hers is in expressive speech. And that you don't really know, right? So now we look back, you can pick up on some things. But yeah, that diagnosis was hard. I do remember the drive back from the appointment very clearly. I don't remember our prep going into the appointment.
Right.
I basically cried all the way back to Tyler.
Yes. And you had shared that with me. And I could feel the pain that you were feeling. Warren, how did you feel?
I definitely was not in we'll talk about this maybe as we go on, but was not in a fix-it mode. I did feel grief, felt sad and not really, but I mean, what do you really know? We still didn't know at that point. I mean, it could be that she's married and has 3 kids right now, right? I mean, it was just that there were some things that were obviously not developmentally correct, but it wasn't like the lady who we saw, the physician who we saw had strong, like, oh my gosh, this is going to be devastating kind of thing. So I think for me, it was probably the grieving I felt was more of a, okay, Lord, so this may be a bump in the road kind of thing. I use that with my patients a lot, and I kind of probably viewed that as more of a inconvenience or a difficulty than a long-term thing at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And you might just say a little bit about special needs because there's such a range of what special needs is.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things, difficulty about a topic like this is because I don't know who may listen at some point. You could often lump special needs into everything from kids with minimal spectrum type things to severe autism to kids who've had severe brain anoxia problems where they're non-communicative, non-ambulatory, feeding tubes. Then you have a kid who may have dyslexia that some would say, well, that's kind of a learning disorder, which is sort of special needs. So one of the things I both wanted to make sure we understood is no matter, or share with whoever listens, is we don't want to act like this is a journey that you guys all, this is what you should do because this is what's thus far worked for us. Because we have as many questions as we have answers still in our life right now about things. But just to realize that there's a whole spectrum. And so I think, there was an old saying I heard once that you eat the fish, but you pick out the bones. You got to take out of this what might be useful in your area that would relate to your child. And us not being experts or authorities on special needs or on raising special needs kids or on diagnosis of the various disorders. So I want to make that clear, kind of that disclaimer, if you will, because that can be confusing and frustrating if you're listening to something that you're like, well, they said you could do this. I can't do that with my kid. And it's like, well, of course you can't. Your kid is a different journey.
Right. No, there's a huge spectrum.
Huge
And parents who are listening to this, they are going to have to put that in perspective. In that, I hope that they will just glean the things that with your specific, with Lauren and her delays, that hers are unique and her future, and her life may not necessarily be the same as their child. You know what I mean? So
I think it might be helpful just to say she's 26 now. She functions at about a 3 to 5-year-old level intellectually, but higher emotionally and relationally. So she can feed herself. She can, toilet herself. She can mostly bathe herself. Sometimes she needs help getting soap out of her hair, but she can't read. She can't do math at all. So there are some significant issues. She couldn't be left alone for a long period of time. Just so your listeners kind of understand where we are.
Her interest would be more, she would still tend to favor watching Barney or a little bit what we would consider young, now toddler or some Disney type stuff. She likes okay, but is very communicative in her expression, even verbally, if you know context. But it's hard to understand her.
No, that's good. She can communicate. You can interact with her.
Correct.
Definitely.
She understands what's going on.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
So let's go back to that drive home from the hospital. So, Ann, you had mentioned that, you were just pretty much all in tears all the way home. And part of a lot of those tears, I'm sure, were grief and also like apprehension of like what is to come here.
Sure.
But I think some of what y'all were told possibly gave you a little bit of relief, like, okay, maybe we're not that crazy. Maybe, there is something like, we've been just making excuses for her. But now we know there is something and that we are going to have to help her.
Yeah. Unfortunately for me, at least in the early years, it turned into we're both physicians. If we do all the right therapies, if we, do OT and PT and speech, we can fix this problem. And
how long were you in that mode of thinking, would you say? Several years?
Yeah,
several years.
Okay.
Probably up until even maybe middle school.
But, again, that's just a vote for the value of you can maintain marriage and a good relationship as a family, in that I think we balanced each other. Because I joked, that if it was left up to me, Lauren's development would have been us sitting on a couch eating chips and watching her shows. And that would have been all I would have invested in. Not that I'm lazy or not driven, obviously, but it's just I didn't have a mindset of trying to go on the internet. And I kind of probably was resolved to what the Lord, like you, gave us this situation and this difficulty, and we're just going to accept it and do the best we can without, I wouldn't say I had hopeless, but not as much fervor for developmental success as Ann had. And I'm thankful she had it, because if she wouldn't have driven some of those things, we may have really missed a lot of opportunity as well. So I don't know if you can speak to that, about that balance back and forth of how we interacted on that.
Yeah, I think it just took us a while, for me especially, to realize she really wasn't broke. We weren't going to fix this. We were going to do what we could to help her develop. But that's every parent of a special needs kid comes to that at a different time frame. And it is kind of like, when she was 2, she could kind of pass as a slow 2-year-old. But then you turn 4 and you turn 6 and you're not potty trained at 7 or 8. And those gaps just get wider and wider.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's good to hear, though, even though you were in the fix-it mode, Lauren so much wasn't necessarily driven to say, hey, we're going to fix Lauren. But at the same time, you're compassionate to Ann, and you just allow Ann to still kind of operate in that mode to, see what Lauren could possibly, her potential could be, kind of thing.
Correct. Yeah. And I think there were times where we probably had discussions. I said, I think we're maybe going too extreme, or we're pushing too hard to find this or that. But then there were also times that I remember thinking, Ann would give me podcasts. Of course, we didn't really have podcasts the way we do now, because that was 26 years ago, but sort of little talks on tape and stuff that that she'd go, you need to listen to this, and I would listen to some, and there was always some truths and some good thoughts. I'm like, I'm glad she's pursuing this because I wasn't aware. And God has given us, and I think we could both hopefully list a few of these during this time. As you go through a journey, I think God drops truths that can come from other believers, from physician type authority, and sometimes just the person on the street that you're like, okay, that was really for me in our situation with our child. And I can name probably 3 or 4 of those that just were, man, like these were really profound little things that I can remember like they're yesterday, even though they were 26 years ago, right?
Wow.
So,
Wow.
you know.
Well, speaking of that, what kind of resources did y'all have back then? I mean, you mentioned there was some podcasts, but was there any kind of community group or anything at the school?
Well, she was in special ed from the time she was 3. And then there was a small community group actually through Green Acres for a short period of time. Again, all the folks had wildly different needs with their kids. So
difficult.
It's difficult. It wasn't like, I tell people she doesn't have Down syndrome, but she probably functions more like you would think of a Down syndrome person. But that's a hard thing when you have a kid who doesn't exactly fit in the mold of this diagnosis. So you may not have the same support as...
So you would say most parents are walking this by themselves?
It feels like it, for
I
sure.
would think so.
Okay.
I would think so.
Okay.
It may have gotten better, so to speak, but as you know, support groups for anything, cancer survivors, things like that, you have to kind of find that community sometimes, and that can be hard. So we're probably a little out of that game right now, if you will, at her age, but...
But those formative years, those early years when y'all were trying to get it figured out, I mean, you had Megan and then y'all had Matthew 4 years after Lauren's birth. And so y'all were parenting them.
We were.
And, there's a lot going on. And so, but tell us a little bit about how Megan and Matthew, what was their relationship like with Lauren?
Well, we all pitched in to help Lauren learn to walk. She had low tone, and so she had special SMOs, they were called, on her feet. Megan would stand at one end of the hallway with a toy. We'd try to get her to walk down to Lauren to walk down to the other end. Now they have a really very close relationship, and I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But, they really learned to have a heart for the marginalized and people that don't fit in because they were around that a lot growing up. So,
Right.
Yeah.
It sounds like they were very involved with Lauren.
I think so. I think Megan, because of her being an older child and, probably feeling the responsibility of his older sibling, did more. Matthew less so. He, being a youngest boy, might have went through a little more of maybe some frustration with why is she needing this or that.
Right.
But one of the principles, and Ann can speak to this as well, that we've really held to, that we had the luxury of holding to with Lauren, again, knowing there's different needs out there for different kids, is we really tried to treat Lauren, and everyone in the family tried to treat Lauren like she was just another kid and not get into vacations or movies or whatever. It's all about whatever Lauren needs and everyone else. And some families don't have that. They have to do that. So we understand that. But I think that can help the sibling sometimes feel also loved and special, and because they're part of a family. And so we had asked them a few words. I mean, Ann could probably go through that, but just how they would describe kind of their feelings of going through there, and I thought they were interesting.
Yeah, I was just going to add to, we always told our kids, you are not the center of the family. You're a wonderful addition. And no kid likes to hear that because they want to be the one, the special, the special one in the family. But how that played out for us is Lauren had chores, and our siblings didn't let her get away with not doing chores. We disciplined her in the way that we thought it was age appropriate. So if she was 9 and doing something like was at a 3-year-old level emotionally, we disciplined her how we would a typical 3-year-old. We didn't just give her a bye because, she's special and she doesn't,
Yeah, a lot of it's just limits more than discipline, just limits to say, hey, that's probably not, if we allow that behavior to go on, it's going to make her really struggle as an adult.
So how did y'all come to that type of parenting and thinking? Did you hear it from somebody like a counselor or one of the therapists that said, treat all of your kids equally, like Lauren, even though she does have special needs, or the Lord just kind of told y'all, this is the way we're going to do it?
I think the latter.
They're probably the latter.
Okay,
We saw some
okay,
kids
very
that,
good.
whose
Yeah.
parents would, and I think we,
Mhm.
saw a family that their special needs son grabbed a toy out of another kid's hands rudely, and the parents, instead of, directing that, said,
Mhm.
left their child with the toy and went over and got the other child another toy.
And
So
tried to soothe the other child. And this was a kid that was more functional than Lauren. So I remember us both talking about saying to each other, that's just not healthy, right? I mean, now, again, if a child doesn't know what they're doing or something, that's a whole different, this kid knew what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw that and we thought, okay, we're raising adults. We're not raising children, right? Lauren's going to be an adult someday. How can she fit into a society
Mm-hmm.
and not make her disability a bigger deal than it is? In other words, where people say, you know what, we love to be around Lauren, even though she might have a disability. And so,
Right.
I don't know. I think that's God's grace.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's good.
She participated in a lot of things our family did to serve other people. And because sometimes even now special needs kids, there's a lot of activities for them. There's special days, there's this or that, and they don't get an opportunity to serve other people. So we rang the Salvation Army bell together. She would pass water out. And I mean, we had her serve others instead of it all being about her. And our other kids were very helpful. They would call me out and they would say, Mom, let her do it. You're crippling her. Let her do it. One of her babysitters taught her how to pump gas. I never would have even considered that. So we had other people saying, hey, let's do she can do some normal things.
No, that's great.
But I do think for the sibling, just because we are bringing that up, I think that sometimes becomes the person who gets most kicked out of the family almost because they aren't the center and they're kind of ignored and their life should center around the special needs child. And I think that can be unfair. A few of the words our kids had said I was mentioning earlier were things like embarrassment and guilt. And but then also joy, and so but you know how difficult teenage years are, right? Junior high, and if you're having a sleepover, Ann was really good about saying to
Megan had a sleepover. Their birthdays are 2 days apart. Lauren does not have to be included in that. This is your time for your friends, just because y'all are 2 years apart. She doesn't always have to be involved in your things, and so I think that took some of the pressure off of them.
Right. So, and I know for y'all with your friends and all that and your church, and did y'all feel like you had support from your church community in helping raise Lauren? And did y'all feel supported or did y'all feel different because you had a special needs child? Because,
there was no Sunday school class she fit into, so she usually came with us to a church service. I would say now our church is her family. We,
no question.
I mean, as an adult, where she is now, she is very loved at our church, very a part of our church.
Right. Well, I just didn't know if parents of special needs, when they're very young, do they feel like, the church is going to embrace them and kind of help them? But, it's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. You can't hardly toss that on a church, but it is difficult. And we know of situations where churches have even had to say, or they felt like they should say to someone like, we just can't manage your child. It's, maybe a child that's really severe in one way or another, and that is a heartbreak.
So let's go to when y'all had a love for missions. Like you always wanted to do foreign missions.
We did.
And so I know that after you had all three, y'all's hearts were still, headed that way. And so tell us about that decision and what it was making that decision, especially with having Lauren and taking her to a foreign country.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can start, but then I want Ann to please say, I would just say that we had, as fourth-year medical students, had been overseas together and had worked kind of medical missions in kind of third world setting in Africa and stuff. So we felt what was interesting, and this is really hard to put in words, but when Lauren, once we accepted her diagnosis, it actually was very freeing spiritually because we just recognized we're not in control. I think we all live under this fallacy that we control our own lives. And I think when we knew that was out of control, and this, I don't mean this in a chaotic way, but that I can make it work, then that almost freed us to say, Lord, would you have us to serve this way? But we had to go through some steps, I think, that Ann can speak to with our organization, a step meeting with a lady in New York. And
Yeah, so I can remember vividly, I was driving out of ETMC parking lot, and I did kind of just not audibly, but hear the Lord say, it's okay if you guys do consider mission. And I thought, oh, no, God, you don't get it. I have a 7-year-old that is not potty trained. I don't think you're really speaking to us. But we kept talking about it, and we did go with an organization. We knew we had to pick a place where she could have services, that we weren't going to lay her on the altar of missions. And so our organization sent us to a specialist in New York who basically said, this is not a good idea for you to do this, to take her out of the country, unless you have this, and these special criteria.
Okay.
And so we did a couple vision trips, and then the country we landed on, actually every one of those criteria was met.
Wow.
and they were pretty specific.
They were very specific.
Like things like her speech therapist needs to be from her region. Well, we're in the Middle East. Where are you going to get somebody from Texas? Well, there was a Texas speech teacher at the place we went.
Yeah.
So there is some kind of really, I'm a lister, and I like to be like, hey, God, I want to be it by faith, but then can you give me all the list things?
Yeah.
And he met all the list things, and he really did for Lauren. And I want to emphasize that we felt very, very called to the responsibility of caring for her as our primary discipleship. And if her needs weren't met, then we would not have went. And I realize there could be some people might argue that perspective, but we felt very strongly, and God in his grace allowed every one of those things to be met.
Wow.
And when the time came, those things left. It was time for us to leave, and we left. And so she has been a dividing rod to a lot of directions and things we've done in our life, because we've always put her needs as a high priority. And that's actually been kind of helpful to guide us in the places we need to be.
Well, the Lord was pretty apparent that y'all needed to go, and y'all went for 3 years.
That's correct.
And I'm sure you have many, many stories from those 3 years, and very rewarding, But y'all came back to the States, and so Lauren continued to do physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and she was able to, did she get through high school?
She did. She graduated from Lindale High Schools in the life skills group.
Okay, good.
Right. And then that's the big question for parents. Okay, high school's done. You can stay in high school in Texas till you're 21. Then what do we do with our special needs child? So that's a huge question for most folks.
Right.
So we bounced around through a couple different groups here in Tyler, and then she started a day program for adults of special needs kids at Breckenridge Village.
Okay, good, good. So that was difficult, because I know a lot of families, they keep their special needs adult child with them. And I know it's difficult. Every family's, circumstances is different. But Lauren, she got used to going to the day program.
Yeah,
at Breckenridge. She loved it.
She loved the day program. But then came the decision to move her in as a resident. And that was a lot more challenging.
Right.
For her and us.
For her and us.
Right.
But we, again, I said there's little things that God says along signposts along the way. One of those are the 3 or 4 that I say are real pertinent to me for both of us was we met with a person who was kind of an expert more at kind of financial planning, but knew a lot about boards throughout Texas, special need board, different programs and stuff. And he kind of said, well, what's your plan? And we said, well, she'll just stay with us, like no big deal. We're just level. And he goes, so what do you do when you're 70 and you're dead, or your wife can't take care of her, or you can't take her? What are you going to do? And we said, I don't know. He goes, no one thinks about that. So it was like a light bulb went off in our head, and we thought, goodness, this is important to plan, to think, what were we doing to maximize her long-term adjustment, knowing that unless we all die the same day, there's going to be some time frame where she wouldn't have us, and not to expect necessarily her siblings are responsible to care for her in their home.
Right.
And so that was really fruitful. And for us, again, I know everyone's situation is different. For us, this day program that then shifted into a residence program during the week, she still comes home with us on almost every weekend, has been thus far a good balance, because she's building community and friends. And she'll say, oh, my friend at Breckenridge. And, you know, a 26-year-old should have friends, right? Not just mom and dad.
Right.
And so we would tell parents to think through that, because that was a really good insight no one had ever talked to us about. And as that man said, he goes, I've seen it. You take a 50-year-old child who's never lived by themselves, and their parent dies, and now you're going to stick them in a group home somewhere. Like, you talk about it,
traumatic.
very traumatic adjustment.
Right. Very traumatic.
So something to think about if you have that opportunity.
Right. So, Ann, I know you had mentioned that you had written a list of all the reasons why Lauren should not live at home with you.
I did.
And so I thought that was interesting, because I know it was a process for y'all to really think this through, and what's best for Lauren, what's best for us, what's best for, Megan and Matthew.
Yeah, it was, we talk about med school was hard. Going overseas and coming back was hard. Nothing was as hard as making that decision. So I did write down a list. I can share some of those that I read over when she has a hard day at her house, or the housemates are mean, or something. And it helps me. So like I said, reasons Lauren cannot be home all the time. I'll just share a couple. She's on the phone or electronics too much. She doesn't have any friends. Her gifts are not utilized at all.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we recognize. Lauren does have some amazing gifts. And if we just kept her at home and she ran errands with me every day, which would be her preference, and let's say on her iPad, the world would not get to experience the gifts that she has. So that was one thing. We won't always be here. She doesn't get any exercise at home. She creates a codependence for herself and me. Sometimes that's not healthy.
Yeah.
And she's not challenged to grow mentally, physically, or emotionally.
Right. And so, and at the home, they have activities, they have people that can,
And I think you have to remember, you send your typical kid off to college. There's an adjustment period. They're homesick. It's hard to live in community with roommates. It's probably much longer and much harder for your special needs child. So we're almost 4 years into it, and I wouldn't know that we're quite over the hump yet, honestly.
No. But, yeah.
How did Lauren transition to living at the home? I mean, I know she moved in full-time when she was 23, and it probably was pretty rocky for a while, but maybe...
There's still rocky days, but... I mean, in fact, we laughed because Sunday night, Ann was like, okay, let's think through the week, because that's Ann's the planner of our family. And she's like, we're going July 4th, we're doing this and that. I see, now, Lauren, you're going to Breckenridge tomorrow. And Lauren goes, oh, man. And we just started laughing. It was like, she was like, okay, but it was like, oh, man.
I do want to say, though, again, just to encourage parents, the first week or two she spent there, she called us multiple times in the middle of the night. We had to take the phone away and put it in the house manager's room, because we couldn't function the next day getting multiple phone calls at night. So that was bad. And we wrestled back and forth. Should we bring her home? Should we leave her there? She was safe. We knew she wasn't being abused. But it's like, I was reading in 1 Samuel the other day, and I was reading about Hannah, and I was like, oh, she took Samuel when he was weaned, maybe he was 3 or 5, to this distant city to live with an elderly priest, and she left him there. How could she do that? How could a mother do that? I thought, oh, wait a minute. I have a little bit of an understanding of what that feels like. So, you're to entrust your child into somebody else's care is challenging.
Honestly, I think she's got the best of both worlds. She gets y'all on the weekends. Y'all are loving her. She knows she's still part of the family, all of that. But then it's time to go back to school kind of thing, and learning how to live
I think
on your
that's
own.
True, Grace. It's really true. One of the things that we realized is that with parents, sometimes we limit our kids' development because we know them to only be at a age of development or skill set that we've seen thus far. And so we don't try other things. So we're used to Lauren, like we pick her clothes off the floor because this and that. Well, she goes there and they may say, you know what? Why wouldn't you pick up your own clothes? And we're like, yeah, why wouldn't you pick up your own clothes?
Right.
But you see, you develop these habits that actually, I think, limit sometimes their development. Again, I keep saying that's our journey with this. But and so I think having some objective people who are experienced who say, no, she can do this. And then we'll find out later, she'll call us, oh, I got a job today, and we went on Meals on Wheels. And I remember her telling Ann, she goes, I could do this every day. And I'm like, gosh, she's out getting to serve people, and she loves it.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have done that with
Oh,
us.
yeah, I know. Our expectations are different.
Different.
Very much.
And I will say too, just speaking for myself, it was a big identity crisis. So, Matthew left at the same time that Lauren moved into Breckenridge. And I was like, oh my gosh, my identity has just walked out the door with my kids. Not only my identity as a mom, but my special needs mom identity walked out the door. So that was really challenging. I did some journaling, I got counseling, I talked to some other moms that were empty nesting, and that was super helpful. But I think for a lot of folks that I see, their child is such a part of their identity. So making that cutting the apron strings,
Healthy separation
is really hard. Get help, talk to somebody. Yeah.
And I think for some men, and again, I don't mean to stereotype in any way, I think especially husbands maybe who have not had a good opportunity to be involved or just whatever personality type habit, I think some men kind of see, well, my wife's identity is being the special needs mom, and I don't really know where I fit in. And special need dad things, there's not a lot of special need dad meetings every month or whatever that maybe, and I think a lot of them, I've always kind of said, when men don't have anything, when they don't know what to do, they just work because that's something they know what to do, and I think it can be a real difficult transition for moms and for dads when they leave home and both are trying to figure out, just like every empty nest, right? But I think it's on steroids when you have a special needs kid, because you really build a lot of your activity and identity.
You do. And so, I mean, you were very hands-on with Lauren growing up. And so, which was wonderful because you were of great help, I'm sure, and a sounding board, and Lauren could go to you, you know what I mean? It wasn't just all mom. And so, some moms obviously will take on the whole responsibility and not let the father do any. And so that you would greatly discourage that, because the father's getting robbed, the child's getting robbed, and the mother is going to lose it.
No, I agree. And I think that's where you hope that early on when this is happening, that there's healthy acceptance of each other on grief, how you grieve differently, how you accept things differently. It doesn't mean, just because I was on the internet every night didn't mean I loved Lauren any less than Ann, right? It was just a different approach. It wasn't wrong or right. It was just me. And for her to see that and value that in the same way, not to me nag on, Ann, why are you looking that up? You don't need to look that up. Just leave things alone. That's not healthy either, because she's needing to, and so it's a balance there. And I think inviting each other in and inviting your kids in, this goes back to what you were asking earlier, to where we are still a family. It's not Lauren and then Ann and then the rest of us are way down the line on, it's a family. And I think God puts these kids in families that he wants them to be in. And I think he's picturing the whole dynamic of moms, dads, siblings, not a great mom only or a great dad only. So,
everybody's of equal importance. I still get my grown kids, they're like, oh, tell me I'm the favorite child. And I'm like, y'all get over that. I mean, why do you want to be the favorite child? But yeah, I can imagine it, having a special needs child, that your marriage could definitely have more of a strain. You know what I mean? So that is definitely something to be in prayer about. To always reconnect with each other and make sure you're on the same page, and this is our child and we're doing this together, and we want all the best for her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but I know that it can be a great burden on, a couple's marriage.
It can, but it can be a great blessing. Like I said, it was actually freeing for us, and it's definitely made our marriage better
Oh, for sure.
because we've learned to communicate on things that we would have all not had to communicate on. So
Yeah,
I think, again,
it's wonderful.
with trials
Yeah.
comes sometimes great,
Mm-hmm.
great
Joy as
endurance
well.
and joy,
Right.
ultimately. Yeah.
So, what were some things about Lauren that made her easier to parent than your other two?
Well,
Wow.
well, go ahead.
She's
Yeah.
very joyful most of the time. So
Yeah.
she was easy in that way.
Good.
I had these two on either end of her, and we would say, kind of high maintenance. Sorry, Matthew and Megan, a little bit high maintenance, but she was just a joy in the middle. She was easygoing. She was
Good. Content.
content.
And, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
I think so. What would
Yeah.
you
No,
say?
I agree. I think Joy, I've always said she's probably the most like Christ of anyone I've been around in that she has a very openness when she sees people. She doesn't care if you're young or old, what color you or your skin is, what your socioeconomics are. She doesn't have a vibe for any of that stuff. It's love, but also not naive love. Like there's some, Lauren's like she can pick up when people are not friendly or whatever, but she loves well, and she really accepts people really, really well. And that part's been easy and actually has been
Taught us a
huge
lot.
teaching
good.
For
of
both
us.
and our
Yeah,
kids.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you realize things of this world, it does not matter.
That's right.
You know what I mean? It's that soul of that person and the heart of that person. And Lauren exhibits that. I mean, a lot of special needs children
They
just
do.
have that childlike
A lot.
love and faith and acceptance of people that the rest of us, we lose, And so, no, that is wonderful. So Lauren now, she's thriving, it sounds like.
I think so. I
And-
think with that, like kind of your kids when they're growing, they do
Right.
well at college, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, maybe they're not doing well, but then they are doing well again. So there's that ups and downs. But
Right.
we think she's right where the Lord would have her be, and that's the
Right.
simplest way I know to say that.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that is wonderful. So, what would you say to a young couple that has a young child who is special needs? Yes, I know the spectrum is huge,
Right.
but, how would you, counsel them as far as like, really relying on the Lord, relying on each other, being in this, 100% and
Yeah.
being in prayer because it is hard and the days are long and you're going to have challenges.
Yeah. I think the early years, at least for us, and I think for other folks I've seen, are definitely the most difficult because the gaps, as I said, keep getting bigger and bigger and the differences get bigger. But
Right.
recognizing that it will get better, it's this
Yeah.
person's going to have an amazing life and has a lot to give back to the world.
Right.
To recognize that and
Yeah.
so that it definitely gets better, and also to at some point make the transition from trying to fix, educate, teach, and just enjoy the person that they are. And so Matthew gave this example. He had her a couple weekends ago. He said, he goes, I can't sit and watch another Blues Clues episode. He goes, Lauren and I both like to sing. So we sang some songs on the way to Andy's and we prayed. And so that he found something that they both like to do together,
Okay.
that they both could enjoy. So just,
Right.
I'd say those were two lessons
No, I
I
think
took
that's
away.
excellent. And I would say along the same line, please invite your spouse into what's happening emotionally to
Yes.
you.
Yes.
I'm hurting right now. I'm frustrated. I'm really angry at God. I'm angry at the school because they won't do this. I'm
Right.
angry at my church because they said, they don't know how to help her or him. And to invite your spouse into that and the journey, I think I'm not aware of a mentorship type situation, but I think that would be valuable if you could find another couple, even if they don't have special needs, that have some wisdom and could sit and go, we're really angry right now with each other. And I don't know if it's because of that, maybe counseling, but I think I think you need to be able to vent stuff, and I think your children need to be able, if you have older children, to vent and say, I'm really frustrated right now. I'm really angry. Ann gave me back in those days, like I say, it was more of a just CD thing, but I still remember one of those little things that God dropped. The lady on there said, it's okay to have a pity party, just don't have it too long. And I thought, it just hit me. I was like, yeah, it's okay to feel sad or frustrated, but just don't live there, because then that's not healthy.
Right.
And little things like that are very helpful.
No, I think that is great advice. I mean, the title of this podcast is Getting Real to Heal.
Right.
So you have to express your emotions.
Yeah.
The Lord knows what you're thinking and feeling anyways, but you have to express it verbally and do it in the safety of, somebody that you love, and they know that, okay, they just need to get it out. You know what I mean? And then you regroup, you come back, and you seek the Lord. And it's like, Lord, how are you going to help me with all of these emotions, that I'm feeling? Because there are going to be challenges, And so, anyways, were there any kind of other resources that y'all want to share that could be helpful, or is it really just more?
I think it's a kind of finding your way.
But there are definitely some things we learned, in this process, and Ann can speak to some of those as well. But for instance, a lot of people, when your child turns 18, you do need to go to the courts, assuming your child is not able to live independently, and you have to become, establish guardianship.
Yeah, that's not just a given.
That's not a given.
Okay.
So there's little practical things like that have to be done to establish that. Social Security benefits.
Okay.
There's things out there like that you need to
And there
establish.
are lawyers that can help you with that.
And there's accounts that you can run if you have the resources that called stable or able accounts. So you can kind of Google some of those things or look them up. I think you were going to speak to another area of that, but I think there's a lot of things out there that can help, that are real practical financial things. I think to sit with a financial planner and say our child's not going to live independently.
Yes.
How much? What do I need to kind of think about? How do we put away money for that, or a home situation for them someday?
Right.
Those
That's
are all
good.
just good basic
It's good advice.
thoughts.
You don't think about it
Yeah.
when your child turns 18.
Right.
And so sounds like y'all have had good counsel.
We have.
We have. But we have,
So
we learned some by hard knocks, right?
right. Well,
As well.
we all do.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
But anyhow, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate
So
both of y'all sharing your journey. I know that this is going to touch a lot of families' lives, and just to know that through this all, that God doesn't make mistakes. And one of your life verses is the one from every good and perfect gift is from the Lord above, who, doesn't change like shifting shadows. And it's so true though. Like, we're all born with deficits. We're all born with disabilities.
Absolutely.
And so all have fallen short.
Right.
Exactly.
All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And so, when you can see that person from God's perspective for his plan and his purposes for their life, then it frees you to finally realize, oh my gosh, I love the fact when you finally said, and, when I finally realized I do not need to fix her, that gave you the freedom to finally enjoy Lauren for who she was, and also God was giving you so much joy just parenting her. Like, all of that just faded away. And so, so to me, that is so true. Like, the Lord wants us to get to that where he's at.
Yeah.
And
another verse that really stuck out to me in this process is the Ephesians 2:10, which is, I'm just going to read it because I don't want to misquote it, but we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. And that truth has really helped us to know Lauren is God's workmanship. She was created in Christ Jesus to do good works that he prepared beforehand for her. So our goal is not to see how we can protect her necessarily or how we can provide for her necessarily, though those are important. We're talking about those things. But how can we best allow her to live out the gifts that God's given
Right.
her, because she is his workmanship.
Right.
This isn't an accident. This isn't like God's up there going, I cannot believe that happened.
Right.
And that may encourage people who sometimes feel like the world is kind of fallen on them, and to say that God has a plan, and that can be, for us, we can give one testimony we never argue about is, no question, it's been life-changing to have Lauren, and has made us better people, and I think better worshipers.
Yeah. No, that is wonderful.
Yeah.
So much closer to the heart of God. You know what I mean? And he's been there with y'all in the trenches, and he will continue to be there for y'all through however long he gives us, you know?
Right.
And so, but anyhow, well, thank you so much for both of y'all for
thank
being
you
on
for
the
having
show.
me.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
So that wraps up today's show, Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace, and I will see you the next time. Bye now. Thank you to today's show sponsor, Express Employment Professionals. They are the leading staffing agency in East Texas, and they have helped thousands of businesses and companies find the right employees. If you are somebody that's looking for a job, Express Employment Professionals can also help you. Go to expresspros.com. That is expresspros.com. If you liked what you heard today and you want these Jesus stories to go out into the world, please consider giving to deepintheheartministries.com. You can also get a hold of me at grace@drgraceenglish.com.